Hi everyone, Alex at Coram Farm. We are filming on location today. We decided instead of a staycation, we did really want to get out of Dodge, and so we are in Idaho right now on a little family vacation, and we thought the scenery behind us was too pretty not to take advantage of, so we thought this would be a great location to film our spring bulb order. I wanted to talk about everything I have ordered for the flower farm for spring, and I thought it would be helpful for those that are interested in planting spring bulbs, whether it is to cut and enjoy inside or to put in your landscape. I wanted to talk a little bit about spring bulbs and give you some information, especially tailored to Oklahoma because that's where I'm at, but it is zone 7. We grow in zone 7A. A lot of Oklahoma is zone 7B and a little bit of zone 8. So if you're in a zone 7 outside of Oklahoma, all of this is applicable, or you can adjust a little bit with what I share with you based on your zone. So spring flowering bulbs are planted in the fall. They're planted typically in October and November, and they overwinter, and they want the cold, they need the cold. So that's why you're never really going to see tulips growing in Arizona or California, because it simply doesn't get cold enough, and the cold is what actually helps the plants bloom properly with the long stems and the long flowers that you see in tulips and daffodils. So that's really important. So when thinking about ordering tulips and daffodils, there are some things to consider. Daffodils are truly perennials. They will come back year after year, and most daffodil varieties will do what's called naturalizing. And naturalizing means over time they will spread and they will grow more bulbs underground off of the mother bulb that you planted, and you can plant an area of daffodils, and over time the area will get much thicker and it'll also start to spread. So daffodils is a really great investment in that you pay once for the bulbs and plant them, and you can enjoy them for years and years and years to come. And over time, your investment increases because they naturalize and you get more and more blooms. So that's the perk about daffodils. Tulips, on the other hand, if you're flower farming, tulips are treated as annuals. So it's one bloom, it's done, the bulb is pulled and trashed, and that's it. If you're using them for landscape, most tulips will not reliably come back for you in about the 3rd year. Some people get lucky and they get a 3rd year bloom, but typically with tulips, you get one beautiful year, and then the next year can be really hit or miss. Some of the bulbs won't bloom. Some of them will send up really short, stubby flowers, or the bloom itself will be small, and then by year 3, it's extra patchy and sporadic. So unlike daffodils, tulips are a bit more of a recurring expense. You're going to be wanting to buy them each year or every other year, depending on how they do in your area. And it's more of an investment for tulips because they're not going to spread typically in the way that daffodils do. Now you will meet some people and they'll say, that's not true. My tulips come every year, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, the exception is not the rule. Typically, tulips are not reliable perennials that spread and come back year after year. So if you're looking at investment and you're saying, I only have X amount to spend on bulbs and I want spring bulbs, I recommend daffodils because it's a one and done that you enjoy for a long period of time. Now, if your budget is a little more flexible and you enjoy buying new things and new varieties and planting every fall, and it's an enjoyable thing and something you budget for, tulips would be a great addition to that, and you can change the colors each year or every couple years of what you like to grow would be tulips. Also in that category would be hyacinth and crocus and alliums. Those are all also spring bulbs. I think behave a bit more like tulips than they do daffodils, but it's something to experiment with. With all of that in mind, there's something else to consider, especially with tulips, and that is what's called chill hours. Chill hours means the amount of hours spent under 32 degrees is what tulips need. Tulips often need the equivalent of 8 to 15 weeks of chill time. And that's why we'll see not hardy in zone 8 and greater or below, because you're not going to get enough chill hours. In zone 7A, where I grow, I am going to get reliably enough chill hours on average in the winter for my tulips to perform well. But if you're in like zone 7B, you're taking a gamble on whether or not your winter is going to be cold enough. Because sometimes if you have an unseasonably warm or more mild winter and you actually experience what is the equivalent of a zone 8 winter, your tulip bulbs are not going to be getting enough chill hours. But you also might have a very cold winter and perform more like a 7A, in which you're fine. So the closer you get to zone 8, the more of a gamble you're taking. So a lot of people in those zones, like when I lived in Albuquerque and I was in zone 7B, I pre-chilled my tulip bulbs. And what that simply means is I put them in my refrigerator for about a month so that they're getting some of those chill hours stored in the bulb before I planted them out around Thanksgiving is what I did. So pre-chilling your bulbs if you're in a warmer 7B and warmer, I highly recommend, because it would be such a bummer to invest what you did in tulips and then have a zone 8 equivalent winter and you get short, stubby, sad little tulips. Now, one note I will say is if you're storing them in your refrigerator, you cannot store the bulbs with fruit, because fruit emits a gas that affects the bulb. And so what I do is we have a spare fridge in the garage, and when my bulbs are in there, that fridge is just used for sodas and milk and yogurts and that sorts of stuff. And all of my fresh produce stays in the indoor fridge. You could use a wine cooler or a beer fridge if you needed, but don't put fruit with your bulbs, or then you're just ruining your bulbs. So that's what chill hours means, and that's what's important to know for your zone. Pretty much most of the Midwest is all up in the zone 6 region, and so they don't even have to think about pre-chilling bulbs. But Oklahoma is in a little bit of that middle section where you need to consider what you're going to do. I know flower farmers that are in the southwest part of Oklahoma in 7B, close to zone 8, and they definitely pre-chill their tulips because they don't want to risk the short, stubby tulips. So with all that said, talking about what spring bulbs are and what they require, I thought I'd go through my list of what I ordered and show you some of the varieties, and then after that, talk to you a little bit about resources for where you can buy quality bulbs from for your investment. So I've ordered roughly 2,000 tulip bulbs for the flower farm to sell. And I'm not paying retail price for these bulbs because I'm getting a wholesale price. And more often than not, if you're watching this video and you're not flower farming, your quantities are going to be much smaller, which means you'll be paying closer to retail price, which is not horrible, but the dollars do change. So mine is wholesale pricing, which allows me to buy as much as I did. But first up, we'll talk about daffodils. I bought 2 daffodil mixes. Both of them, one of them's 100 bulbs and one of them's 250 bulbs. The first one is a doubles mix. Double daffodils will always cost you more. They're more unique, they're more rare, so your price per bulb is going to be much more than your traditional single. I love the singles, but the doubles are just so unique and interesting. You can get pink ruffle, you can get a full white ruffle, and like a light butter yellow ruffle. So I bought a mix. I'm a mix kind of girl. I know some people prefer to buy like bulk in one variety and they like to plant a drift all of one variety. I tend to go for mixes because I like the surprise. I like being able to grow a bunch of different things all at once instead of giant blocks of the same thing. So I have a doubles mix of 100 bulbs, and then I have a singles mix of 250 bulbs. And my plan is I'm going to put a lot of my daffodils in ground to naturalize. I can cut them to sell and they'll continue to spread, and I'll have more and more daffodils for years to come. But I'm probably also going to put a bunch of them in my raised garden because that'll just look absolutely beautiful in the spring. And then once I've cut from them, I will, and the foliage dies back, I'll dig up the bulbs and then transplant them out into a perennial field because I'm not going to have them live forever in my raised garden setup. So that's 350 daffodil bulbs, and in the future I could be looking at closer to 500 daffodil bulbs as they naturalize and I get more and more stems. So I'm super excited about that for daffodils. Now onto the tulips, which is just my favorite part because my favorite part because of all the color choices you have with tulips that's different with daffodils. So first up, I have a Darwin Salmon Impression, which, if I'm remembering correctly, is a beautiful apricot coral color. You will see when you're looking for tulips, you'll see Darwin a lot. And Darwin is a variety with lots of different colors that has known to have a very long stem. So often when you see like at the Tulsa Botanical Gardens or in beautiful catalogs and stuff, and you just see these massive stems with big blooms on the top and big drifts in catalogs and whatnot, those are often the Darwin series because they just get so unusually big. So I have the Salmon Impression. And then I have a Darwin Pride mix. Again, I talked about how I love mixes, and my plan is to put these tulips, I should back up. Almost all of my tulips are going in my raised garden. The reason I'm doing that my first year in Oklahoma is we have very wet springs, and I'm a little nervous about rotting and our wet clay affecting the bulb. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put almost all of my tulips in the premium soil, premium drainage of my raised garden to see how they perform, to see if I have to just keep it that way or if I can eventually move them out into the field. And so part of that experiment is I bought a mix. It's called a Pride mix with lots of different colors. I think there's yellows, reds, and purples in it. I'm going to put them in ground and I'll be able to compare stem length and rotting and issues with the different types of soil and conditions they're in. And it'll be really fun to enjoy in my perennial space, lots of tulips coming up. I'm undetermined on whether I'm going to sell stems from that or leave them for me to enjoy as just beautiful landscape in the front of the house. So that's 100 bulbs. Next up is, it's a fringe variety. Fringe Sunset Miami. I have 100 of them. You can have your standard cupped tulip. There are fringe tulips, which right at the edge of the blooms, they look like frilly fringe. And then you can have parrots, which are ruffled all the way through the bloom. Those are 3 different types of tulips. The fringe and the ruffles tend to be more expensive because they're way more rare than your standard tulip. So keep that in mind when you look at pricing, that's why. But Fringe Sunset Miami is like this ombre pink and orange. I'm trying to remember this from memory, but there's a picture on the screen. Pink, orange, yellow with the frill at the top. I'm really excited about that. Next is Tulip Apricot Parrot. So I just said the parrot is the frill on the tulip, and it looks beautiful, especially when the tulip blows out, which means it opens up and you no longer have the tight cup, but it's open. You can see all the frill and all the different color variations. So typically with your Darwins and your single bud tulips, it's one solid color, which is beautiful and impactful, especially when you buy like a bunch of 10 gorgeous yellow tulips. So it's beautiful, so Easter, so classic spring. But with the fringe and the parrot, you're able to get this variegation in color, which I think is so unique. And I'm hoping my customers really love getting to have tulips that you can't just buy in a grocery store, because you will not find these kind of tulips in a grocery store. Next up, again, I'm a mix girl, so I got a parrot mix. There are at least 10 different parrot tulips of all different colors, and I ordered bulk of a couple that really caught my eye. Like I said, the apricot parrot caught my eye, and I have a couple others coming up, but there are a lot more. So I thought it would be fun to order, how many did I say? 200, to get a couple of those other varieties, and I can identify and say, oh my gosh, that blew me away. And then next year I can order specifically that variety. Next up is Tulip Amazing Parrot. So I ordered way more parrot varieties than any others just because of the uniqueness. I thought my customers would just really get a kick out of it. So Amazing Parrot, another beautiful ombre. Parrot Cabana, again 200. And then, I'm just looking here at my list, going back to singles. So one of the reasons why I didn't want to order a ton of singles is it's hard to compete with the grocery store and Walmart tulips that you see. And you can get 10 tulips for $7, which is crazy. It barely even covers cost of pink or yellow or purple singles. And it's hard to compete when I'm going to sell 10 for $20. And you say, oh my gosh, that's a huge price difference. There's a couple reasons. One, you get into just these mass tulip farms in Holland, and they're shipped over to the United States, and the bulk quantities allow the prices, like Costco can charge so little because of their wholesale bulk purchasing. But also, a grocery store and a Walmart tulip will never ever look as good as a local flower grown tulip. The bulbs or the blooms are at least half, if not more than half, the size. They're just weeny little things. Your stem is this big. It's the tiniest little bunch. And so, okay, $7 kind of is all it's worth because it's so dinky. You look at a local flower farm growing tulips, you are going to get an 18-inch stem. You are going to get a bud that is at least 2 inches across, is another level. And I'm telling you, if you are able to look for local farms in your area that are going to have tulips for sale in the spring, buy them and compare them to Walmart, and I guarantee you, you will be convinced that the $20 is worth it, and it is way more impactful on your table for Easter or Mother's Day to enjoy than the flown halfway across the world dinky little wholesale tulips. I'm telling you, it's worth it to find local flowers. And so I am going to grow some singles, and I'm hoping that I can convince customers that my solid pinks and solid purples still look above and beyond in quality from competing with the Walmart and the grocery store tulip. So I have early candy prints, which is I got 200, and I have single late renown. So you're probably wondering, why is there the early and the late in there? Tulips will grow across a 6-week period sometime in the spring, and you will have early bloomers, which tend to be late March, early April. You have mid-season bloomers, which most tulip varieties will fall into. That's in your mid-April time frame. And then you have your late blooming tulips, which is end of April, sometimes if you're lucky into May in zone 7. And it's important, if you want to have lots of color and not just a flash in the pan for 3-4 weeks, to buy early, mid, and late season tulips. So I have an early single, I have a late single. So my hope is that from end of March through early May, if I can even push it to Mother's Day, I'm going to have a variety of tulips growing in order to sell. But also, if I were planting in my landscape, I would want to have as long as possible spring to enjoy blooms, not just for 3 weeks and then that's it, which is always kind of a bummer. And last but not least, I bought 2 more mixes. I bought another parrot mix and I bought a single mix. And I think the colors will be really fun. I plan to sell like bunches of singles, so like yellows together, pinks together, but I'm also going to offer a mix because I think I would love to buy a mix of yellows, pinks, and purples, for example, not just only solid tone together. So lots of mixes. This is my first year growing these bulbs in Oklahoma. The principles do apply based on your zone of how you're growing these things. There's nothing that crazy unique about Oklahoma zone 7 versus another zone 7 in a lot of ways, but I'm still learning my customer base and what they want locally. So I thought it would be wise to buy a bunch of varieties, a bunch of mixes and colors, and learn from my customers what they want. And I'll be able to know at the end of spring, my mixes sold fantastic, or people preferred the single tone, or the parrots were crazy and they didn't care about the singles, that sort of thing. So then in the following year, I can adjust my ordering accordingly. But for you, if you're growing in your landscape, grow the colors you like. If you have yellows and whites and purples because your irises, and that's the color tone that you have for spring, well then grow those. Don't pop a red in there. If red annoys you, don't order a red. That sort of thing. And last but not least, let's see. I have 50 ranunculus that I'm bringing in. I'm not going to really talk about ranunculus on the video because ranunculus is way trickier to grow than daffodils and tulips. And so I think I'll wait until early spring when I'm actually planting the ranunculus. I'm not going to overwinter mine. I'm going to plant them in very early spring. I will do a video talking about that because there'll be still time for you to get your hands on ranunculus and try growing them if you'd like. And I'll go through a step-by-step because it is not as easy as daffodils and tulips. You just pop it in the ground, semi-forget about it, and enjoy the colors. Way more hands-on, but I'm going to have 50 ranunculus to go in the raised bed. And last but not least, we ordered 50 peony plants. 50 peony bare roots, technically, not the big potted ones you see at the nursery, that would break the bank, but peony bare roots that we're going to be planting along our fence line. This is an investment where we need to wait 2-3 years before we can really enjoy the blooms, but buying bare roots is the easiest way to get lots of peonies and not break the bank, because a gallon-sized peony at a nursery is going to be $35 to $50 depending on the variety. Sometimes you can get lucky at Lowe's for like $29.99. So to buy 50 of those would be crazy. So we went the bare root route with delayed gratification, that we're going to grow these roots out and in 2-3 years have a spectacular peony display. So all of that's going to be going in October and November. So real fast here at the end, I want to talk about good sources for where to buy these bulbs. I mentioned I bought mine wholesale. In order to buy mine at the prices that I bought, I need to have a business wholesale account with the company. It's a different world. But for retail, there are really great options. You can go to your local nursery. You can go to Lowe's. You'll see the cute little bags. That's a great way if you're thinking, I've never grown these before, I don't want to invest a lot. So grab a couple of those bags, a couple different colors that you like, pop them in the ground, have it be a learning year. But your quantities are usually not going to be more than like 10 or 5, which when you do plant them, it's not that much. It ends up feeling a little bit dinky. But again, if you're nervous and you don't want to spend a lot, that's still a great way to start small and not feel like if it messed up or something went wrong, you didn't spend a lot of money on it. Now, if you do want more, say you have an area where you're just like, I want this filled with daffodils, I need 100 bulbs, that sort of thing. There's a couple places I would go. The first would be Color Blends. Color Blends is an online company that sells their bulbs from Holland. They are what I would call a almost semi-wholesale retailer. So the prices aren't quite as low as what I paid having a wholesale account with another company, but they're way cheaper than Lowe's. So typically with Lowe's, you're going to be spending about $1 a bulb, give or take. At Color Blends, you're talking more about 50 to 60 cents a bulb. That's a big difference. The only downside is with places like Color Blends, in order to keep their prices low, often a lot of their varieties require minimum order. So you do need to order a couple hundred, if not more, of varieties. So that can be prohibitive for some people, but also if you have girlfriends or friends, you can go in on an order, hit those minimums, and then divide up the bulbs once they're delivered. So that's a good way to get around it. So colorblends.com, I've grown from them. They have an incredible amount of daffodils and tulips, but you want to get in on that soon, because I bet you some of the stuff is already sold out. People are preparing for spring because these bulbs are delivered in October typically. And they also have daffodils and hyacinth, alliums. They have all your spring bulbs. So try there. Another is your Tulip World, Dutch grown, Holland bulbs. These are all retailers that getting all their bulbs from Holland. This is pretty much where all of our tulips and daffodils come. They have, Holland pretty much has a market on the Tulip World. Their prices, again, are not quite wholesale, but they're still going to be way cheaper than a Lowe's or a local nursery in the smaller bags. So I would encourage you to look at those, grow a bunch of different varieties. Pay attention when you're making your order at the early, mid, and late. Try to have a mix there so that it's not just 3 weeks of enjoyment, you get a much longer season, and experiment with things. And again, I'll mention again, if you are zone 7B or warmer, consider pre-chilling your bulbs, because there's nothing that sucks more than doing all this work in the fall to plant and then having stubby little flowers, or they don't even come up at all because they didn't get enough chill hours. That is just such a bummer. So pop them in the fridge for 4 weeks before you plant. And especially if you're in a warmer climate, you are able to still plant around Thanksgiving. Your ground is not frozen like Wisconsin ground is frozen, and they had to get their act together mid-October. So I hope this was a helpful video. I'm personally so excited to get all these bulbs and to sell them in the spring when everyone is just hungry for color after the long winter. And I encourage you to try in your own landscape growing tulips and daffodils. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.